I received a call from the man who, along with his girlfriend, had a frightening encounter with a strange creature on November 20th, 2011, outside of Troy in Bradford County, Pennsylvania. The fellow told me that what they saw scared the hell out of them. After conducting extensive interviews with the driver and his girlfriend, I learned the following details. At about 11:05 p.m. that evening, they were driving onto Mud Creek Road, traveling west towards Highway 14 near Troy. As they continued down the dark road, their attention was drawn to the left side of the roadway. The man, who was the driver, saw some movement and mentioned it to his girlfriend. The woman initially thought that a naked man was crawling on the side of the road. The driver decreased his speed, swerved his truck in the middle of the road, and directed the high beams of his headlights toward the subject. They had stopped about 30 or 40 feet away. They soon realized that this was not a person, but instead a creature that was crawling very low to the ground. As they watched, the creature got into a squatting position with its back completely straight, somewhat like the stance of a kangaroo. The arms of the creature were held tightly to its body. What looked like long claws that resembled the talons of an eagle were easily visible. The claws were estimated to be about 8 to 10 inches in length. One claw was shorter than the other 3. The head of the beast appeared to be oversized and shaped like that of a wolf. At the top of its head were 2 pointed bat-like ears that looked to be about 4 to 6 inches long. The entire creature, according to the man, was covered with dull, wrinkly, dark black skin. The man described seeing large canine-like teeth in its mouth. The eyes of the creature were about the size of a silver dollar and were black. The man stated that even though he had his high beams directed at the creature, the eyes did not reflect at all. He said he looked over the body during the 12-second encounter, and for some reason thought the creature should have wings, but none were apparent. In the squatted position, the creature seemed to be about 5 feet tall. The creature was in the left lane of the road and about 1 or 2 feet onto the pavement, and as the couple watched in amazement, the creature began to stretch its body. The man said that at this point the animal started to stand up on its back legs. Then the animal fell over on all 4 legs. The witnesses observed that the front claws of the creature were now 2 feet across the center line of the highway, while the back feet remained 1 or 2 feet from the edge of the road. The creature then turns its head to the right and looked towards the vehicle. The driver told me that it looked directly at them with a horrified expression, like it was panicked. He saw it take a deep breath. He had the feeling that the creature didn't realize that it was being observed. And when it realized it was like it was caught doing something. Once it did realize it was being observed, it leaned back slightly and then reached forward with its claws. The creature then took one tremendous leap, cleared a 7-foot embankment, and moved out of sight into a wooded area. The man estimated that leap was about 40 feet long. As it was in the process of leaping, it was perfectly straight and held its front claws forward. Then, just a second after the creature was gone from sight, something else odd occurred. A large bird, possibly an owl, suddenly rushed at the passenger side window, almost hitting the glass. It happened so fast they were unsure if it was an owl or not. The witnesses indicated that this creature appeared to be changing form. The driver said, its shape was nothing like when it was squatted, and the woman stated that it shaped into another form. She thought it was a dark brown color and looked like a werewolf with a little back hair. The woman, while reluctant to say it, said,
I think it was a man changing into a werewolf.
The man, after the experience, went onto the internet to try to figure out what he saw, and told me that the closest way he could describe the creature would be a gargoyle with no wings. The man commented, I will never forget what we saw that night. I need some insight, or someone that has experienced the same thing. So I lived in a small town, and our house was located down a long dirt road, with trees on each side, and large farmer fields behind them divided by your typical metal-wired fences. Well, one evening me and a friend decided to take a walk while the sun set, to get our daily exercise, and kill some time and enjoy the view. Sometimes our neighbors' cows would get out of their fence, and we would have to round them up and lead them back into the gates. My friend was walking in front of me a fairly decent distance away, and for some reason I looked behind me, and all I could see was reflective eyes from the trees. I did not think anything of it, except that it was the cow that had gotten lost again, and the atmosphere didn't seem off by any means. So I go over to the spot where I see the eyes, and I come to a complete stop. And then I witness this long, skinny creature. It was hunched over with no genitalia, no expression, gray skin and no nose, and black eyes sunken into its head. I did not feel fear, but I was in shock and unable to move. We just stared at each other. The creature did not break eye contact, even when my friend came running up. But my friend shook me and pulled me away, and we ran off as fast as we could, and I never looked back. Some people told me it was a Wendigo or skinwalker, but it didn't try to attack me or anything. If anyone has any clues on what that thing was, please let me know. I'm guessing as to the date, since it has been almost 1 year since this sighting. It was a Sunday night, and it was a full or nearly full moon, with a few clouds and a very mild temperature. I am certain of the time of the sighting, since I normally walk my dog no later than 9 p.m., but I was late on this particular night because I had been watching a show on TV. This was an unusual location to see something like this, because I live in a nice older neighborhood, but it is within a mile of wide open country. I followed the same route walking my dog every evening, and I was almost back to my house. I stopped because I saw two very large black hairy things coming down the driveway of the house across the street. I could see the hair standing up on their backs. They had jerky movements, and I remember thinking they looked like giant black tumbleweeds coming down the driveway. There was a large bush at the end of the driveway, and they were coming down to try to hide behind it. They were both too big to fit behind the bush, and I saw the one in the back actually back up because there wasn't enough room. My dog is part beagle and always has her nose to the ground, and she didn't see these things at first. They made no sound at all. But when the one backed up, she looked up and saw it, and she stood perfectly still as I was doing. I was not going to move any closer to my house because they were right across the street from it. These things seemed to have realized they had been seen, and both of them moved very quickly back up the driveway. They stopped at the front corner of the house and stood up on two legs. They were very tall. That's when I could see that they were brown, not black. When they stood up, they stretched with their arms above their heads and shook like dogs trying to shake water off of their fur. Then they took off around the front of the house and were gone. I never got a good look at their heads, and they did not turn around and look back in my direction before they ran in front of the house. I stood there for a few more seconds before running to my house. I don't know what I saw, but they were not dogs, or bears, or human, and I never walk my dog now without taking along protection. It was nearing the end of my first season as a park ranger. It was normal for us to stay open until midnight, as we had bathrooms and such to close down. It was around 11:30, and I was tasked with closing down the trail down the road. I hopped in one of our many trucks and headed over to close it. This trail leads into a very large forest with a few bridges, ditches, and creeks. It took me a few minutes to get there, and when I did, everything seemed fine. I had done this before, so I knew the whole ordeal. I grabbed the chain out of the back of the truck and began to lock the gate. But before I did, I shouted for anyone in there to come out. I didn't want anyone to be locked in there all night. There is another way for someone to get out of the trail. This was mostly a courtesy shout for anyone with vehicles. Getting a vehicle out of there past midnight is a bitch. I waited a minute or so, and after no response, I began to lock the gate. As I locked it, I noticed that the one light we had at the entrance had enhanced something hiding in the dark. I couldn't see it perfectly, but I noticed it looked human-like. At first sight, I thought it was a teenager, as they are known to fuck around in that trail frequently. I call once more, and it just laid there. Fear began to set in, as I thought someone dumped a body. My mind tends to drift to the worst-case scenario. I forgot that I left my walkie-talkie back at the station, so I locked the gate up and looked back just to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Whatever that thing was no longer laying, but crouched. I just stood there, shocked. There was no way it was an animal either. That was easy to tell just by looking at it. From what I gathered, the thing was skeletal. I mean rib cage poking out and literally just skin on bone. It had human properties, multiple digits, human physique, human-looking head. It lacked hair of any kind. The scariest part of it all, though, were its eyes. They resembled deer eyes. You know how deer eyes reflect light in a way that human eyes don't? Well, that's what was going on here. If you've ever played Until Dawn, it looked very similar to a Wendigo from that game. I began to shake. I scare pretty easily, and I opened the door to the truck and jumped in. I got the hell out of there onto the road. Before leaving, I noticed that it was slowly crawling into a ditch that lined the path. The next day, I drove back to the station, and my supervisor told me that we had record numbers of deer on the trails and in the park, 5 of which caused a child to cry because they almost trampled him. That's a different story for a different day, though. I don't know if there's a correlation or not, but if so, I think it's safe to assume that what I ran into was some sort of forest entity. I'm starting up my 2nd season in a few days, and I hope I never see it again. After last night, I am a believer that skinwalkers exist and still roam freely. I am still terrified of what I saw, and I wasn't the only one that witnessed it. My girlfriend and I had just gotten into our vehicle, and we're about to head out for a drink around 10:30 p.m. Now before I continue, I want to paint a little picture of our surroundings, but I don't want to give too much information of my specific location or anything, just to be safe. I will say we are staying in public lodging in Montana on a hiking trip / vacation. Our vehicle was in a fairly vacant lot with a 12-foot fenced enclosure at the end of it. We had just gotten into our car like I said before, and I turned the vehicle on. The automatic lights flipped on, revealing what I immediately knew had to be a skinwalker. It sprung forward from its previous sitting position and ran about 3 very fast steps before leaping over this fence. And its body scared the fuck out of me. It had light tan skin, but it was very spindly. Think Slender Man build, and it was about 6 or 7 feet tall. Its arms were long as shit and thin. It had long fingers that looked almost like claws. The head had a human shape to it, but the eyes were pure black. It turned to look at us in that brief moment, and there was no light reflection. Nothing. It all happened in less than 5 seconds. I turned toward my girlfriend. She sat there staring at the fence and could only whisper,
"Drive."
I couldn't move. I just kept saying, that was a skinwalker. That was a damn skinwalker. Finally, she turned toward me and basically screamed at me to drive. I got us the hell out of there, and we proceeded to go to the bar and get wasted, refusing to talk about it. We got a ride home and got our vehicle in the morning. She still won't talk to me about it, but I think according to legends, you're not supposed to talk about it. Am I right? I think maybe we should end this trip early. For a bit of backstory, I work the graveyard shift in the North Carolina mountains. Working these dark hours kind of leaves limited things to occupy my time on my days off. Normally I just go out driving or hiking and walking in the dark. That is, if I don't have a video game I want to play or a movie I want to watch. With this hobby, I often come across unusual things in the darkness. I've experienced things I can't forget, like this story. This happened about 2 weeks ago. I've been scared to talk about it because every time I do, when the dark comes, I get a bad feeling or start to hear things. Anyway, it was my night off. I was getting kind of bored with laying around watching YouTube while my boyfriend slept. So like most weekends, now that it's getting warmer, I decided to go out for a drive. It's about 1 a.m. and cloudless, so I head up to the parkway like normal. It's bound to be a beautiful drive. Nope, it's closed. Well, maybe I'll go up to Pisgah Forest. I haven't been there since high school, I think. And off I drive. It's about 3 a.m. by the time I get to the entrance of the forest. It's already looking pretty foreboding. The entrance is smack in the middle of a tourist tubing, ice cream, and souvenir haven. The parking lots are brightly lit, and they all have cute signs, but the entrance is completely the opposite. It's a long, straight road with absolutely no lights, disappearing into the night. Only campers go up there after dark. I don't think much of it. It's nighttime, of course it looks pretty scary. Everything looks scary in the dark. So up I drive. Everything is pretty normal for a while. I pass by turnoffs for picnics and campgrounds, all dark. But the higher I climb up the mountain, the more anxious I start to feel. Something isn't right. I'm normally fine at night. It's my time. But something just feels off. I keep pushing on. The winding road climbs higher and higher. Forest is all around me, thick and serene. The air is warm and smells so good and musty. I can't shake the bad feeling. I try to ignore it, thinking maybe it's because I can't see the moon, like when I go on the parkway. Yeah, that's it. It's gotta be it. But as the climb gets steeper, I get more and more freaked out. My chest is tight and becoming painful, but I keep going, just trying to ignore it. I'm passing the waterfalls, hearing the water roaring out of sight. I should be relaxing, but I can't. After a while, I notice the turnoffs are few and far between. I haven't passed any in a while. The pain in my chest is alarming me, and I'm considering heading back down. Suddenly, I smell something unusual. You ever remember being little and your parents have that particular smell? Like a perfume or cologne they might wear that you immediately recognize in your adult years? Well, my dad was a factory worker and a smoker, so from a young age he always smelled of motor oil, harsh metal, coffee, and cigarettes. An odd combination, but that's him. And that's the smell I smelt. In the middle of the woods, with nothing but trees and clean air around, I smelt my dad. It was subtle, but I got the hint. I need to turn around and go home now. I drove on until I found a safe place I could do a K-turn. Right as I got my car straightened out, I stopped dead. The smell of rot had flooded through my open windows, and there, inches from my front bumper, was a creature. It was crouched down, looking at the dirt. The body wasn't right. It looked like a big hairy dog crouching on all fours. But the legs, they were too long to be a normal dog. My eyes moved up to its head, a human head. Long dark hair covering a face I couldn't see. But its eyes, I could see them, and they met mine, red-orange, glowing back at me. My heart felt like it was going to stop, and tears started filling my eyes. I hadn't been this scared in my whole life, and the horrible smell was suffocating. The creature started to move, and I don't know what happened. It was like my body flipped a switch. I wasn't thinking anymore. I didn't feel anything. I just stomped on the gas pedal. I veered around the creature and sped off down the mountain. I feel like I should have clipped it with my car, it was that close, but I don't remember recognizing that I connected with anything. And all I remember after that was that my phone rang, long after I left the forest. It was my twin. She felt like something was wrong and had been trying to get a hold of me for half an hour. I drove to her house and explained the whole thing, waiting for the sun to come up. This has been one of the most terrifying experiences that has happened to me, and every time I tell someone about it, something unexplained happens. Like when I told my twin. That night she heard some banging on her closet door, with no one or nothing inside. When I told my parents, my mother saw some red eyes in the woods when she went out to smoke. When I told my boyfriend the next evening, we both heard a crash outside, but when we looked, there was nothing amiss. I don't know if it's the same creature and it somehow follows me across counties, or something else warning me to not talk about it. So I don't know if anything will happen after I post this. I hope not. I still go out driving at night, and it's actually my night off, but I think I'll just stay home and play it safe. This happened in Kenosha, Utah. My two brothers and I were hunting, and had our younger horse with us and our dog, basically wasting time hunting squirrels and getting the colt used to hunting, so we could use him in the future when we needed a pack horse. We had been walking off the trail for at least 2 miles, maybe 3. It was quite light outside still, but getting close to sunset. We were hiking uphill, and our dog suddenly began acting very squirrely. His hair stood up along his back, shoulders, and neck. He began huffing and snorting, and getting very anxious. He was growling and woofing, but repeatedly looking in several different directions. At the same time, the colt began acting very spooky. His eyes widened, head thrown up high, nostrils flared, and he began to dance around nervously. He was letting out snorts and breathing loud and heavily. Shortly after the animals began acting up, we came up over a part of the hill where it flattened out for a couple 100 yards, before it curved up steeply again. As we came up over the hill, there were trees 30 or 40 yards ahead, and I did a double take. There was a huge, black, hairy creature with bright yellow eyes standing slightly behind a tree, but peering out at us, as if it was making a very poor and careless effort to conceal itself. It was just massive. Its thighs were the size of tree trunks, and its chest was easily 4 feet wide, if not larger. One arm was hanging loose at its side, and one was holding onto the tree next to it. The creature was swaying back and forth. It stared at us for only a few seconds, and we stared back. And then we heard a very low, chest-shaking rumble, almost like the sound an elephant makes. As it made that sound, it turned and sprinted up the hill ahead of us, and into the line of trees that covered the rest of the mountain ahead as far as we could see. As soon as it began running, our barking dog bolted and disappeared into the trees after it. We yelled for the stupid mutt to come back, but he didn't listen. We could hear the dog barking further and further away, and then it was silent for several seconds. Then we heard a very faint yelp off in the distance, and the yelping continued and slowly got louder and louder, until we saw the dog emerge from the tree line and come barreling back to us. The dog had many small cuts, was very dirty and scared shitless, but was otherwise in one piece. We busted our asses back down the mountain, and after walking for what seemed like forever, we found an old empty cabin that was actually in quite good shape. We went inside and unlocked the garage and brought the spooked colt in. Then we locked that door and covered the little window at the top with some newspaper and masking tape. We went inside the little cabin and made sure every window and door was locked. And all night long, we could hear something circling that cabin. Branches and sticks snapping, loud rustling, hisses, etc. We didn't leave the cabin until daylight, and we practically ran our asses back to the truck. And I haven't went hunting since. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Send your story or creepypasta to the email in the description. Send your story or creepypasta to the email in the description. My shirts, Patreon, Instagram, and Twitter are down there too. I gotta wrap this up because I gotta go to the bathroom real bad. So, be good to animals, even people. So. Hey, I'm coming in here.
I'm in the shower.
Yeah, so big deal, I gotta piss.
Well, don't flush it.
Yeah. Oh.
God, you're disgusting.
Yeah, whatever. Oh yeah, I forgot, because you don't fart, right?
Ja, snämar, björksbus, hörs.